It's showing us live on my end, Cassandra.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cassandra Cavness. I am the Development Assistant at the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts. Tonight, we are hosting Creative Conversations, Art.
Showing us live on my end, Cassandra.
Art and the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. Tonight, we have good evening, everyone. Wanda Battle with us, Cavness, and the Development Assistant at the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts. Tonight, we are hosting Creative Conversations, Art. Okay, and we are joined tonight, sorry about that. We are joined tonight with Wanda Battle, who is the tour director for the Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, and Madeline Burkhardt, who is the adult education and curator at the Rosa Parks Museum. So thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight for this wonderful conversation that we're going to have. We are just so thrilled that you could be here tonight to be able to talk about Martin Luther King and to talk about art in general and how important art is to the city, to us, to society, all that good stuff. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having
me. We're glad to be here.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Martin Luther King Jr., right? So his birthday, we just celebrated that, right? So that was a great momentous occasion around the country, around the world. And part of the reason why I think this year it was so important is, you know, the message that King had for us of unity, of, you know, loving one another, coming together towards common goals. And I think that's really important in today's society and today's climate. And I just think it's something that we all kind of need to remember. So this program is really going to focus not so much about what he did or his legacy, as it is going to talk about the art and public art that surrounds him, and how does that shape his legacy, and how does public art help to tell the story, and how do artists help to tell the story of our political figures, of our historical figures, and of our history in general, right? So first, we're going to talk to Madeline Burkhardt about public art. So let's talk a little bit, Madeline, about the public art that is around the country and around the world of Martin Luther King Jr.
Sure. So a lot of cities, and as you can see from Cassandra's list, and some countries have art of Dr. King. And from what I found working at a civil rights museum in Montgomery, Alabama, is that we do have a lot of visitors from other countries who are super familiar with Dr. King, Rosa Parks, and other key figures from the civil rights movement. And a lot of people that I've encountered too really associate Dr. King with Atlanta, and they kind of forget, or they're just not as knowledgeable about him being in, you know, Montgomery at that time. But I mean, he was really, really young when he was in Montgomery. He was like 26 when he moved to Montgomery, and like at the start of the bus boycott, and was 27 for the 382 days of the boycott. So it's like, it's almost a different Dr. King than the Dr. King people are familiar with from history books and documentaries and oral histories and things like that. So the public art that I think is the most famous one is the one that you have on here from the memorial that's in Washington, D.C. And that was the one that's always really shared on the holiday and everything. So yeah, when you're looking at those cities, you know, you can, as you can see, Montgomery is not listed on there, which is kind of interesting and kind of sad. I think we do need something on him, you know, in Montgomery, because he called this city home for about 4 years, I think, 3 or 4 years.
Yes, I mean, I completely agree. And you know, let's define public art a little bit for people.
Sure.
So when we're talking about public art, there are things around Montgomery that do celebrate Dr. King. We're not saying that there aren't, but there's not, you know, kind of this monumental statue to him. There's not something that celebrates him in that way. There's, you know, a couple of paintings around town that are of him or have him incorporated in it, but there's not a standalone statue where people can go and, you know, look at it and reflect and think upon all that he meant and all that he continues to mean to us in Montgomery. You know, and I personally think that is needed, you know. I think we have one of Rosa Parks, you know, here in Montgomery. And I think, like you said, you know, he was here, he preached here, he was an activist here, and, you know, he called this place home, right? So we need to embrace that, I feel, to help us tell the fuller story, right? Isn't that what art does, is to help us tell that bigger story?
Yeah, and I think public art too, it's like a form of visual culture, and art is sometimes seen as this very like intimidating, almost like pastime for people. So there are huge like majority of people who don't even want to bother going into a museum if it is a fine arts museum. Or something like that, because they might think, okay, I don't have the knowledge or the background or the education to fully understand what I'm watching or looking at. And so they're not going to go into that museum. But if you have public art around, which doesn't have to be a sculpture, it can be street art, it can be graffiti, it could even be, you know, a poster or a flyer that you have tacked to a wall, then that makes it more accessible for everyone that is around, and they're looking at art and maybe just not knowing that it's art, but it's kind of just infiltrating that into their minds. And if you're in the birthplace of the civil rights movement, I think that needs to be kind of shouted out from every corner of the city, especially downtown.
I definitely agree. Speaking of downtown and speaking of being able to kind of see some things that are public art in a way, so outside of this Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, there is art in a sense, because the sidewalk that is by this church right there at the stoplight that you can see in this photograph, the sidewalk is footsteps, right, Wanda? And what do those footsteps mean?
Yeah, that crosswalk commemorates the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. And when you place your foot in any of those footprints, they're giant. And it represents you're walking in the footsteps of giants, people who sacrificed and who've led the way for activism and for change. And so it is so perfect that they are in that crosswalk in front of Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, right there in front of the Alabama State Capitol. And so that's very significant.
Did you want to give us a little background on the church and how Dr. King is related to it?
Oh, absolutely. I want to thank the Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts for even hosting this conversation. This is a very important conversation about art and the legacy of Dr. King, because you can hardly go into any city really around the world or in this country where there is not some type of artistic representation of his life and of him. And many streets are named after him. And so Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, being the only church Dr. King pastored, many people don't know that. And it's the only church he ever pastored from 1954 to 1960. And with that, he was only 25 years of age when he was installed as pastor. And he was there from 1954 till 1960. And many people don't know Mrs. Coretta Scott King was 2 years older than her husband. She was 27 years of age when they came to Dexter. So if you can imagine how mature they had to have been to step into this role, even as pastor of this church, where many of the parishioners were older than they were, but the wisdom, the kindness, the vocal and oral ability and skill that Dr. King had, and a personality that was so kind. And many of the members of Dexter who are still there say that about him, say he was very kind, and so was Mrs. Coretta Scott King. They were wonderful, down-to-earth people. So I just wanted to say that about their personalities. This church is still a historical landmark, and the civil rights mural that's in the basement of the church is absolutely a masterpiece. And I want to thank Mr. John Fagan for the work that he has done in preserving this history of civil rights here in Montgomery. Deacon Fagan is in his 90s now. And if you all can imagine, through the years that I have done tours at Dexter, I have toured many of the students who were his art students at Carver High School, where he taught for 32 years. And I tell you, they loved him. And with that, Zakifa Show and Arthur Kennedy were two students that assisted him in painting this mural. And it took 2 years, from 1978 until 1980. And it is just a masterpiece. And I just want to read a little piece, if you all don't mind, that Deacon wrote about having presented this mural. He says, "I've always loved drawing and painting large action figures at an early age. I would decorate the sidewalks on my street with characters from the comic strips and storybooks. I spent many evenings and early mornings painting large clowns and animals on the walls of my guardian's shoe repair shop. From junior high school through the Army, college, and during my professional career, I continued to paint large scenes, landscapes, and historic events. I attended Dexter Avenue Baptist Church during the civil rights struggle, and Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was my pastor. It was no surprise that after his death, I would be inspired to paint the mural as a memorial to our late former pastor, Dr. King, and that great movement. It took 2 years to complete the painting." And he ends, "May this mural help us view the past, assess our present, and plan work toward a better future." Isn't that wonderful?
That is powerful.
Yeah.
I've always loved the heart of an artist when they are inspired to create. And so as we look at this mural that Deacon Fagan has created, I want to just kind of highlight a few things that's on the actual mural. And it flows along a full wall in the basement of Dexter Church. So whenever you can, come to see it. When we open again, I should say that, add that piece. But as you look at this mural, there are different depictions on the mural. And it starts off with Rosa Parks's arrest at around 5 p.m. on December 1st, 1955. So you see the scenes there of the Klein and Son, the clock on the corner where she was across the street at the bus stop. And then you look above, and I often say this, you see Governor George Wallace. Many visitors and tourists are amazed that Governor Wallace, believe it or not, being known as a segregationist, came back to Dexter in 1979. He unexpectedly arrived to the service one Sunday morning, and he was wheeled into the church and apologized to the congregation. Isn't that amazing? And I often share that because most visitors have no idea that he ever offered an apology for his stand for segregation and his opposition to Dr. King and the movement, but he did. And as you're looking further down, you'll see the Ku Klux Klan, because not a part of activism is that you have the struggle, but you have the opposers. You have those that are fighting for, as John Lewis would say, getting into good trouble. And then you have those who oppose it. And so Deacon Fagan has represented that on the mural as well, of scenes of the Ku Klux Klan represented there. You also see in the middle where you see the angel kind of presenting paper before Dr. King. And on that paper is Matthew 5:11, a scripture that says, it tells him that be not, oh my goodness, it's not coming to my mind right away, but he's telling Dr. King that it's not because you are, that you're Dr. King, that they are fighting against you, but it's for my name's sake. And so the way the artist has presented that, he's saying to Dr. King, be of cheer, be of comfort, for, you know, I'm with you. And as you look further down, you see different civil rights activists, people who were involved in civil rights. You see Jesse Jackson and Fred Shuttlesworth. Many people have asked, why is Elijah Muhammad on the mural? But he is represented there, everybody, because during that time, the Black Muslims were encouraging Black men to take their place in history and stand up, you know, for what was right in this country, the appreciation that Black men were due. And so Deacon Fagan has placed him on this mural as well. And you see Mrs. Coretta Scott King and the children presented here. Yolanda was the eldest of the children, and as you know, she passed away in 2007. But Martin III, Dexter, and Bernice, who is the youngest daughter, all featured here on the mural as his family. And then they present Dr. King in purple because he's represented as this royalty, as the pastor of Dexter Church, and he's being given honor. And you're seeing the various facets of art work that represents the journey of his work, because you see him as a young man first, and as you move around through his life, you see him then towards the end of his life. And he depicts Dr. King much more matured. And even though he was just 39 years of age, everybody, they say he had the heart of a 65-year-old man because of the stress and the pressures. But I thank God that Deacon Fagan has presented him in this way to help us see the journey of his life. And then where you see that he, the night before he was killed, he delivered his famous, "I've been to the mountaintop" speech. And you see the passion in his face and expression, because he knew he was not leaving Memphis alive. And so we all share these emotions with him as we look into his spirit, and we appreciate his sacrifice, you know, for humankind. And you see J. Edgar Hoover is represented here, and James Earl Ray is on the mural, because they represent the one who, I'll say J. Edgar Hoover really hated Dr. King. And most people believe he was behind that, you know, plot to assassinate Dr. King, but it was never proven. And James Earl Ray, you know, many people believe that he did kill Dr. King, but the King family, I'll be honest with you, they, Mrs. King and Dexter met with him, and they really don't believe he was really the one. So many visitors ask, well, why did the artist place them in here? Well, that's the truth of the story. And that's one thing that art does. It tells the truth. And some of the truth that art tells is not pretty. In fact, a lot of it in our country is not pretty. It's ugly and it's painful, but it's still our our story. And then you see Dr. King, after he's assassinated, he's rejoined with many martyrs who have died for civil rights, as you see him depicted as an angelic figure. And then at the end, you see the children. Well, that's him saying to us, the work has been passed on to each one of us, and we must now take our place to be the beloved community, to live and love in our diversity. And up at the top above the children, which you can't see, are his last words: free at last, free at last. And we know he said in his speech at the March on Washington, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. So you all, this mural represents a lot of our history. And I thank God that Dr. King's life has been depicted artistically in many places around our world, and that we are giving honor to a life and lives well lived.
Thank you, Wanda. I think that this mural, it's so rich. There's so much there. There's just so much that you can talk about when you give your tours just from this one piece of art, right? Now, how do you think that your tours would differ if you didn't have that to draw upon?
What I would do, you're right, because it gives such a visual. And I want to talk about children in art who tour with me. Children are fascinated by visuals. They learn from visuals quickly, music and artistic visuals. And so without the mural, it would be a bit more challenging. But I must say that my style of touring, I try to bring the stories to life through engagement. For instance, I would have the children come to the front of the sanctuary and recite, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And I would allow them to come and present themselves, to hear themselves share these messages of Dr. King so they can get them in their spirit. Yes. And to sing. Yes, children love to sing. That's another teaching tool I use on tours. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. And children, no matter where they are from around the world, that's an easy song to pick up. And I tell them, not only was it a favorite during the Montgomery bus boycott and civil rights movement, but everybody, that's who we are on this planet. We're shining lights, and everywhere we go, we should be sharing love and light with one another in the beauty of our diversity.
You are the best tour guide in the city too. I tell everyone that when they leave because of that, because you do make everything, it does come to life. And I think, this is just me personally, I think you could do that without the mural, but I do know that the mural really helps, especially because, like you said, kids, they love visuals, but you bring everything to life every time. And I've never seen a smile not be on your face when you're in there telling stories. So this is
I might say this to everybody here. What it does is, which is really special to art itself, art helps every person who partakes to realize a part of themselves that they didn't realize was really there. Art helps us to find self. It helps us to appreciate who we are. That's why parents spend a lot of money trying to put children in art and drawing and music and dance, because it's a form of self-expression and it helps us to find our own worth. And I can truly say, doing these tours and telling these stories, using the art and the music, it has really helped me find my purpose. And I'm very grateful for it. So thank you, ladies, for the work that you do too. It's very special.
Well, thank you. Madeline, let's talk a little bit about, because Wanda was talking about, children and art and how the visuals really help children. Let's talk a little bit about adults. How do you think art, surrounding the civil rights movement more generally and Dr. King, how do you think that helps adults to understand the story?
Man, Wanda is a hard person to follow behind after all that. I know with kids specifically, and I know you asked about adults, but I know from my own experiences with the art exhibitions that we've hosted at the museum, kids go in with an innocence and they're not jaded by, well, this could symbolize this, that, and the other. Whereas like adults kind of already have that in their head, like, oh, red means anger. Or like I said, the purple stands for royalty. It usually always does in a painting. Like there are these things that are known to be true throughout everything. But adults also hopefully have a little bit more historical context, or just context of where they are, as opposed to where a kid's imagination can run wild when they're looking at something. Adults could be like, oh, well, I know exactly why the Ku Klux Klan is in this, or that's definitely J. Edgar Hoover, and I know why he's in that mural. But another comment that I've gotten from at the museum from adults as well as kids is that visuals really help with empathy, whereas like your textbooks or books or teachers, whoever, can tell you, okay, Dr. King did this, 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 and then he was murdered. And, you hear that and you're just like, okay, sure. But then if you go and have a tour with Wanda and you're getting these visuals plus just hearing her passion, it brings the whole thing to life in a different way. Like, for example, we had a show on the transatlantic slave trade once, and we had some adults in the room who said, I've always seen this diagram of the slave ship, the Brooks diagram of the slave ship in my textbook, but it wasn't until this artist came in and made life-size figures and put them together and put them in chains did I realize the amount of pain and suffering and the true cruelty of that event. And that's so helpful for people who haven't, lived through that history, or who have no connection with that part of history. I think that kind of art has really helped, like, me personally be able to work at the Rosa Parks Museum, because I am coming from a place of privilege there. And if it wasn't for the people who come in and they tell me their stories when they're at the museum, but also seeing those visuals, seeing those people who have that kind of fire in their soul and in their eyes in those photos, that really helps you better and more fully understand what happened then. And art has been around since the dawn of time and always represents something that is important to people. Like, you're not going to make a mural of something that you don't care about or wasn't important during that time. And so it's just another way to record history, and one that can provide more emotional impact than just reading the words.
I find that so fascinating that, you're talking about the emotional impact of art. And I think the thing that gets me most is how art kind of just goes to your soul. It gets beneath all those layers, and you can really connect with art on such a personal, emotional level. And really, I think that's what is so great about it, is that not everybody gets the same thing out of it, because not everybody's putting the same thing into it. And I think that is also what is great about public art, is having these wonderful murals, these wonderful statues around your city to help tell your city's story, but also to help enrich the people who live there, enrich their lives, And that's one of the things that I think Montgomery is doing a better job of in these recent months, is trying to create that enrichment in our lives. through public art and through different things around the city. And, you know, we had mentioned earlier, you know, that there's not a statue of King. And what does that mean? What does that tell us? How could his story be better told if there was one? You know, I do feel that it would help to tell a fuller story if there was a statue of him in Montgomery and that we embraced it. But we also don't want to short sight what is there, you know, what we are able to see because of these wonderful artists throughout our city, right? So let's talk a little bit about it. So public art in Montgomery. Now, earlier we had talked about Dr. King being in murals or in paintings around the city. So this is one of them. So it's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dreamcatcher. This is on 30 Perry Street at South Perry Street and Washington Avenue. So right at that corner. It's on the outside of a building. And it's just an amazing representation of, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. and, you know, what that represents to this particular artist who, you know, I'm not sure who actually did this one. There wasn't a signature on this one. But to me, it's just so embodies, I think, what the artist thought of Dr. King. And being able to walk around and see things like that is just amazing. And then to our right, we have Michelle Browder's piece, which is by the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's called The March Continues. It's at 403 Washington Avenue. And this depicts, you know, the right to vote and our need to get out there and say, you know, we have the right to vote. We need the right to vote, and it's our responsibility to vote, right? And so these two pieces are just amazing. Let's talk about them for a minute.
You know, Ms. Cavness, I was thinking that as you were saying, the theme of this one is voting, and I thought about John Lewis saying that the vote is the one nonviolent tool in this nation to bring about change. Well, as I was thinking about art being a form of activism is also a nonviolent tool for bringing about change. Because when you're looking at pieces like this, it makes you go inward to examine what do you believe in? Do you support the message that's being presented? And I just think it's so wonderful that it's a way for us to engage and connect as a community. And so I love what the city and these artists that are here locally are doing to place this public art around our city to make us aware and educate us and to inspire us.
I subscribe to the theory that all art is political. So no matter, you know what, even with that banana that was duct taped to the wall last year, the year before, whatever that is, now Pantone's colors match the banana and that duct tape, but the Pantone color of the year for this year. But I mean, these are very like overtly political works of art, and I find that like the Dreamcatcher one, I pass it every day, and I think it's really interesting how two cultures have been blended together because, you know, dream catchers are symbols and works of art done by Native Americans and Indigenous peoples. And they put that in with Dr. King, and Dr. King's dream was, you know, that everyone live equally. And I really love that piece. Like that was probably the first piece of public art that caught my eye when I first moved to Montgomery and I first started going downtown, which was just like almost 5 years ago now. I haven't been to see Michelle Browder's yet, but Michelle Browder's is interactive, which I don't think you may have mentioned, but you were encouraged to go up to her mural and lay down and act like you're holding up a sign and fighting for voting rights and to fully restore the Voting Rights Act, which is something that, you know, people don't realize hasn't has had some parts of it taken out in the past few years. So it's really important to have that educational aspect on there as well.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the things that, you know, I think we need to talk a little bit about is how art and artists, by merely creating their work, you know, are engaging in activism, that they are trying to make a change. They're either trying to say, look, this is the way it happened, as you know, Ms. Battle was talking about earlier with art telling the truth, or they're trying to say, this is what needs to happen, right? This is where we need to go. And that's what I think is so great about art, is that it gives us a platform to say all these things all at once without, you know, without having to be kind of like in your face about it, right? You know, as Ms. Battle said, you get to interact with it. You get to decide, do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? How do I feel about this? How does this make me think about the issue? How does this change my view on the issue, or does it at all, you know? But that's the beauty of art, is that we all can kind of come to it, engage with it in whatever way, you know, we need to. Art meets us where we are. And that's what I think is so great about it. But like Madeline said too, education is an important part of art as well. We can use it as an educational tool, right? Like we had talked about earlier with the mural at Dexter Church. Art allows us to teach the citizens of our city, tourists, people around the world about our history in so many different ways. And what's so great about a lot of this art around the city is that it invokes something in you. And so, for instance, the next two pieces that we're going to talk about, the top one is A Mighty Walk from Selma, done by Sonny Polk, and the bottom is Unforgettable, that was done by Gerald Gentman, Corey Spearman, Sonny Polk, and Elsie Alexander. And, you know, for me, there's just so much emotion and in the top one, and in the bottom one, I can hear music. I can see his show, you know, I can interact with it in that way. What do you guys think?
And looking at this one with Nat King Cole, because he is a native of Montgomery, even though he grew up and spent a lot of time in Chicago, Illinois. But to have this mural and this public piece of art give honor and tribute to the work that he did internationally is so wonderful. And I love the way it's presented here in the city. And you were right. You can hear music. I agree with that. And I'm one of his fans. I love Nat King Cole. So this is a great piece of art. And as I looked at the work by Mr. Polk, I was listening to your comments before too, Ms. Cavness. I was thinking art creates a movement as well. You know, like we say the nonviolent movement. Art creates a movement because it's from generation to generation. Can you imagine the many people that generations from now will view these works of art within their time period and still be able to associate with them, be able to make a connection with them, and feel what who talked about apathy, and I mean empathy, that Madeline mentioned. It makes us feel connected, whether it's generation, you know, now or the generation to come, it connects us all. So I thank God for these pieces of art, being presented here in this city for preservation.
And the top one is right by the museum, and I always see people out there taking photos of it. They always stop by there wherever they're headed next in the city, whether it's to Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, or if it's to the Legacy Museum or the Freedom Rides Museum. people always stop there because it's so eye-catching. It's not done in realistic colors at all. And a lot of times this one, I think, invokes a little bit of anger because it has Edmund Pettus Bridge like in the forefront. So people will see that, then they'll come in the museum and be like, why haven't you changed that name yet? Why is that still the name of that bridge? And, you know, it's, these works don't hide the fact that is the name of it. You know, we're not skirting over that at all, that part of history. And I believe the placement of this is kind of, if you were to, you know, redo that whole march today, you would come across this and pass it before you got to the Capitol. And so the placement is fully intentional too. And yeah, it's really dynamic. And I mean, the Nat King Cole one is as well because of the color choice and the font that, you know, the artist chose to use, and everything about it just comes together into one cohesive piece.
One of the other things that I have examined too, and where they have placed these murals, the cities, you know, in places where the buildings have been closed for many years and could be a cold, you know, uninhabited area, they have specifically placed some of these murals in these places that really bring life to that area and give interest, because the one of Nat King Cole is near the riverfront, and it makes it interesting, and it gels with that atmosphere of that park scene and the river scene there in the area. So I'm very thankful for the placement of the murals that have been, you know, placed around the city, and the artwork, you know, the activism artwork. It's just perfectly placed.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing that I love about the A Mighty Walk from Selma is it evokes so much passion. I mean, if you just look at the faces of the people depicted, you can tell how passionate and how determined they were. They were not going to let anything stop them along this journey. You know, whether that was the journey of literally Selma to Montgomery or the journey of civil rights, you know, and that to me is what I get from this is that passion, that level of camaraderie also. I mean, you know, are they shouting? Are they chanting? Are they singing freedom songs? You know, what are they doing? But you can tell that they're doing it together. And I think in today's climate, that is something that, you know, we all kind of need to remember, is that we need to come together, you know, and do things together. And that's one of the great things about art, is that art can be a unifier. You know, art can help us come together as a society, as a culture, and, you know, look upon our past, but also be hopeful for our future.
Yes. I really agree with that. Notice the artists have placed 4 American flags in this depiction. And I looked at that and I said, well, wow, this is a representation of us fulfilling and marching for the American dream, that we will be brought to the table of brotherhood, and we're marching and we're willing to sacrifice to fulfill what America's promise to us is. And so I love this whole presence of this piece of artwork. Yeah. And that march, you know, was very important because there are still people in the community who were in that original march. And it makes it even more embracing, because there are many civil rights foot soldiers, they call them, who are still living, who are part of this story. And so it could be that this artist is depicting some of those people who he may have met, or he understands this story and understands in a certain way their pain and the struggle. And so he's depicting it and bringing it so that generations to come will understand and feel what he wants us to feel in this painting. It's beautiful. This mural is just beautiful.
and the thing that I am struck by is you talked about foot soldiers, right? And how some of them are still alive. And a lot of them that are still alive were children when this occurred, right? And so depicting children in art and also using art to teach children, I think is really important, because I think a lot of times people forget that children were a part of this movement. It wasn't all just adults. And I think the visuals of these murals, of statues, of pictures, of all different types of things that artists represent, I think it helps children connect to the fact that children were a part of the movement, because a lot of children today have a hard time imagining being part of something like that. So I think art helps to bridge that connection and to allow people to kind of feel a little bit a part of what happened.
Absolutely. Cheyenne Webb Kreisberg is one of our Montgomery natives. She's a native of Selma. And she was 8 years of age when she walked into the church with her girlfriend, and they met Dr. King. And Dr. King wondered, who are these little girls coming to hear me speak today? And Cheyenne has written a book entitled Selma, Lord Selma. And she, I think, was one of the youngest of the children in this march in 1965. And she tells her story, and she's still telling her story. And she's telling them to children especially, as well as adults, so that they understand her place in this struggle for our freedom. And the fact that we're still pressing our way forward for that freedom. And so I thank God for every one of the foot soldiers that are still living, who are telling their stories in this area. Very important.
Yeah, we push that on a lot of our tours too, how, first thing is everyone who became, so well known and became leaders, they were just ordinary people to begin with. So we always push that to the school kids that come through. And then the second thing is, Rosa Parks helped develop the youth chapter of the NAACP in the area. She did a lot of work with kids. I mean, a lot of those marches and protests that happened in Birmingham later were done by kids. And at the end of our tours, some of our tour guides make the kids repeat phrases back to them so they understand, you can be a part of this too. And then some actually will come in with questions saying like, well, what about the March for Our Lives, or try to connect it with some of the things that they see high school students doing today or, in the past few years. And I think that's really important too, because if they keep seeing people their age speaking up and speaking out, then they're going to do it too. And I think that's one way that technology has become really beneficial, because, not all of the kids have access to seeing these murals or, hearing Wanda speak at the church all the time. But they have TikTok or something. And, they might can see this stuff on Twitter or TikTok or hear others talk about what they've done on there. And that's really empowering. We had Meta Ellis come to the museum and talk about her time in Montgomery when she was really little during the Montgomery bus boycott. And that was, really enlightening. She was talking about when she was really little, she was like heckling the police officers that were at her house. And she had all these kind of quirky stories about, such a serious time in history. But that was the part she remembered, and it made such an impact on her that she is continuously fighting for equality for all people today. So if you get them involved really early, I think they're going to continue to do it later in life too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what is so great about, this discussion in general, is that, public art and the art and that we're talking about here that depicts the civil rights movement, that depicts Dr. King, it all helps to shape his legacy, right? It all helps to shape the story of the civil rights movement. And I think, you know, something that Wanda talked about earlier is the truth, that, you know, these are going to be here for generation and generation to come. And it allows us to have the truth be shown, right? Because we know that there's lots of things out there that might not be telling the whole story, right? They might be telling one side of it, whether, you know, it's the positive or the negative side. They might only be telling one side of it. And so I think that, you know, art really tries to get down and tell the raw story, to tell the true story, the whole story. And I think that's what really our city is trying to embrace with all of these public murals, is to tell the fuller story of the Montgomery bus boycott, of the Selma to Montgomery March, of you know, all these events and these civil rights activists that have come through Montgomery and that still live there. And I just treasure the fact that we have these public art pieces for us to have discussions about like this, to talk on this platform that, you know, is going out to the world, and to let people know, hey, come down, see what we have. These are important artworks, and that, you know, we have done a little, but we have more to do. And I think that's kind of what art teaches us, is that, you know, we've come so far, but we still have so far to go.
Yes.
Yeah,
and I hope it will challenge us as well, so that when we come and see all of these meaningful pieces of art, I pray that it will go within us and inspire us to change, help us to examine ourselves and want to be better because of it. And so that's our message out of Montgomery to people who are watching this video, is take these messages of trial and struggle, and now what do we do with it? Do something good. Love people of all diversity. Yes, we're all brothers and sisters. Be kind, forgive people. And so let it reach out and make us more humane.
And I think that's some of the beauty of public art, is how it can change over time, because people's perceptions change over time. And when you're saying, you know, depicting the truth, some of the public art that is still standing today was depicting one person's truth that's not necessarily true. And so by Montgomery coming up and being like, hey, we want to depict more Rosa Parks, we want to depict more of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., or, you know, Joanne Robinson, Nat King Cole, whoever, they're kind of rejecting this sense of back in, you know, Reconstruction era, when they started putting up statues and public art as a form of intimidation. You know, there's not to like get overly political on this or anything, but, you know, when I said before that you only show things that are important to you in art and put them out in public like that. At one time, James Marion Sims, who was sitting on the Capitol grounds, was very important to the people of Montgomery and to the people in the state of Alabama. Today, he is not important of a man. The women that are part of that story are the ones who are important. So they are the ones who need to be depicted. The other statues and things like that, they are not important anymore. And so that's why you see so many coming down or being relocated in so many other cities and states, because the perception has changed. They don't want that oppressive art in their city, in their state, you know, or anything like that. They're wanting to move forward with these changes. And so I think by Montgomery coming out, and I mean, there's a really recent Claudette Colvin mural that was unveiled too. And so you're now getting to the part of history that you want to celebrate, right? And telling the parts of stories that have only until recently been really suppressed. And I think that's really important. And I'm glad that Montgomery has realized that in the past few years.
May I ask this? Do you ladies agree with me that I believe that Montgomery and our country is in a transition now. It's like a change of a wind of changes come in. And all of us want to be better, and we want to know the truth. We don't want to live in the dark places anymore, and we don't want to be separated from one another anymore. We want to understand each other and appreciate each other in our diversity. Do you all feel Montgomery is really in that transition place now?
Yeah, and historically, after the plague came the Renaissance. And I think that's some of what's happening now is you've got, COVID-19, and people are being forced to learn and reckon with things that they haven't had to in the past. And out of that comes rebirth. And I think that's a lot of what's going on, in the energy, especially in Montgomery, but out throughout the nation, is very electric, I think. So,
and I would have to agree, and I think too, this COVID-19 pandemic has also taught people or reminded people of the importance of the arts, because what have people turned to during this time? The arts, right? And so I think it's rekindled that passion for the arts. And I think that people are now at the precipice of wanting to be different, to be better, to change, as you say. And I truly do believe that Montgomery and our nation is headed towards this newness and unity. And, I think a lot of that has to do with us being able to express ourselves through these artistic representations, like, visual arts or performing arts, or, musical avenues, and being able to tell these fuller stories, and being able to embrace, as you had said, the ugly parts, the dark parts of our history, and have it out there and tell everyone, this might not look good, but this is what happened. And that's the only way that we can kind of move forward, is when we acknowledge that. And I think that's where we are. I do.
As a tour guide, I feel that it is a call and calling to tell these stories truthfully, that it is not just a job to give facts, but it's an honored positioning that is one of privilege, to be able to tell people the truth of these stories of how heinous the treatment of African Americans and the indigenous peoples of this state really was. And then to be able to say, but now here we are, we're changing now. We're coming into a place so that white people will understand, that Black people need them to understand and accept the truth of what has happened in this city, in this state, and in this country. And now be willing to step up and say, I embrace. And so I can tell you, I got in the marches and the protests after George Floyd was killed, ladies. And I joined, I'm 64 years of age, and I got in those marches with the young people, and the crowd was very diverse. And I took their hands to tell them that I supported their stand, to voice and to stand against the injustice that they were marching for. And I said, I want you to know that that's what we did back then as children. And now it's my time to stand with you. And so I feel an honor as a tour guide and as a citizen of this city and community to be able to help give direction and be a compass. I like that word, to be a compass for the young people that are coming through now, taking their place in this work of activism. And they're doing it with love. And I teach them to do it with nonviolence. Yeah, but that it's very important that they do it, because change, that's how change is gonna come. Yeah, so I feel honored to just be in this time, in this season, telling these stories of truth.
I completely agree with you. I feel the same way. When we have exhibitions up that speak to this nature, when we, are able to host programs like this that speak to these things and talk about art and how art moves us and how art changes us, I feel that it is imperative that we continue to do that, and that we continue to engage in these ways and engage in this dialogue and share with the world our stories and what we have to offer and our art and our hearts, really. And so I just want to thank you both for, being willing to share your evening with us all tonight, and to talk about these great works of art and the way in which they help shape the story, the way in which they help tell the story, and how they help us move forward as a nation, as a people. And, I just really want to thank you for being here tonight and, sharing this hour with us.
Thank you so very much, too. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'll do anything with Wanda ever.
Just call me. With Madeline and Miss Cavness.
Right.
Yes, you all are amazing ladies. Thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Well, I love you both. Thank you. And so that ends this program tonight, and we thank you for tuning in. And, we look forward to seeing you in Montgomery and around town and enjoying these great public art pieces. So thank you all and have a great night.